Noswaith, good evening, everyone. We at the Inclusive Journalism Cymru team and our friends at the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism are delighted to welcome you to our information session around our new Cynefin Fellowship. My name's Shirish Kulkarni, and I'm the founder of Inclusive Journalism Cymru, which, as you've probably seen or heard by now, is a network to protect, support, and campaign for journalists and aspiring journalists who've been marginalised or excluded by the journalism industry. We'll talk a little bit more about why we exist and what we do over the course of the next hour or so. But first of all, I'm delighted to welcome Mitali Mukherjee, the director of the Reuters Institute. Mitali, thanks so much for being here and mainly for working with us on this fellowship. We're very excited to be collaborating with you and your whole team because actually the Institute has really consistently been a very powerful voice for the importance of inclusion and innovation to a sustainable future for journalism and indeed society, because I think that's the only point of journalism. So for us, at least this feels like a natural but really important partnership. So just to give you a sense of how we're going to spend the next hour or so, we thought it'd be nice for Mitali and I to spend the next few minutes essentially kind of in conversation about why we think this fellowship is important, what it'll look like, and most importantly, feel like, the kinds of projects you might want to explore as part of your application, and some of the logistical questions you might have as well. And we're going to record that section, so you may be watching this recording now, but that's so we can exactly so we can share it with people who can't be here. And then we're going to turn off the recording and open up the floor for questions from those of you who can be here. So I hope that sounds okay. And just to save wasting anyone's time, either here or on the recording, we've had a really great response to the announcement of the fellowship. We just wanted to make clear some key eligibility criteria. And those are essentially that you have to be a journalist in and from Wales in the UK, because we're a Welsh organisation. And secondly, you need to have at least 3 years' experience in the broader industry. And it's in the context of those eligibility criteria that we'll be talking tonight. And as I say, we just wanted to kind of make that clear so we don't waste anyone's time. And if you haven't seen it, you may also find useful the link that I'm going to drop in the chat here. And for those who are watching on the recording, it's a blog on our fellowship page, on our web page, about how to apply for the fellowship. And so without further ado, Mitali, you were kind enough to get in touch with me to suggest the ideas of us having a fellowship. So I wanted to ask, I guess, what inspired you, I suppose, to do that? And I'm guessing some of that was around you feeling that the mission and values of the Institute aligned with what we've been trying to do here in Wales.
Shirish, thank you first for having me on this conversation, and I hope it sort of spreads far and wide to the community that we want to reach. I actually thought I might start with an odd and interesting little factoid, which is that you and I have met in person for a grand total of 30 seconds, if memory serves me right, where we were basically sort of waving at each other from the head and the foot of the staircase at 13 Norham Gardens, which is where the Reuters Institute is. But so far does spread his name and fame that Shirish has been such a great sort of, I think, ally to journalism, honestly, and definitely to the Institute. And the work that you've done with our fellows in the past has always been so rich. And we're huge admirers of everything that you do, Shirish, individually, and of course for Media Cymru as well. So I can only say, I think we're really lucky to have you and the community at Cymru sort of join us more formally. I think it started with the report that you worked so deeply with and on, Shirish, which was essentially, and I'm literally paraphrasing what was a long project, just trying to build from inside out, working with the community, understanding what journalism looks like to their mind. And I was struck by so many of the conversations you had there. But I think what really left me a bit unsettled was the observation by one of your members saying, we see the journalism and the police in the same way. And it really kind of hit me about this is exactly what we're trying to build with the fellowship program. We're trying to build these journalists who can go back to their communities and have the ability to think inside out, to think about what the stories are that audiences want to hear, and why journalism, to my mind, and responsible journalism still remains such a powerful tool to do that. And I think that's when I sent you a whole lot of emails that you very kindly responded to, Shirish. And maybe it would be useful just to spend a very quick few minutes talking to people about the Institute, because that may not be familiar to everyone. So the Reuters Institute is a part of the University of Oxford. We were born in 1983, and our goal at that point, and that remains today, is to inform the debate and conversation around the future of journalism. What does that look like? What does it need? What are its challenges? Where are its opportunities? And even before the Institute was born, actually, the fellowship existed. So that's completed more than 40 years. It's always been the effort of the fellowship has always been, how can we reach out to journalists whose voices and work and ideas need amplification? And I felt like the work that you were doing and we were doing on the fellowship side, because we do a bunch of other things, really had such a synchronous fit, if I may. And I really, really wanted to build out from the region. I know, in the minds of people, it might be sort of a small space, but I think that's where you really build ideas. You work with communities, you build ground up, and that impacts the kind of journalism that you're trying to do, and B, the fact that, I mean, you're still a young spark, Shirish, but I feel quite old in the industry, and I
I
know
think
that the
I'm older than you, actually. So,
are you? I don't know.
yeah.
Let's agree not to share that
Yeah.
detail. And I think, if we want to discuss honestly, what the future of journalism is, we have to hand the baton to younger journalists, which is why we talked about this fellowship. So
Yeah.
that's, a little bit of our story at Reuters, but I think it would be really useful for everyone from the community to hear from you, Shirish, on what kind of work you've been doing, of course, at Journalism Cymru, but also why you felt drawn to the idea of building this fellowship for the region, for journalists from Wales.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that point you mentioned about people in the News for All project that we worked on, that thinking about journalists in the way they think about the police is a really important one, because I think it's a really challenging thing for us as journalists to kind of accept, because we think, most of us, I think, became journalists because we wanted to be part of making the world a better place. But I suppose what we found is it's not individual journalists that they're causing these questions, these rational questions. It's the systems of journalism and the way the business models have kind of, in a way, diverted the purpose of journalism into something else. And I suppose that really relates to why we started Inclusive Journalism Cymru as well, because we don't see what we do as about saving journalism or protecting any particular notion of journalism. Actually, we see this as, because it's a network to protect, support, and campaign for marginalized journalists. This is a network that's about systems change, frankly, because I sometimes say, by definition, marginalized people need systems change so they were not marginalized. And guess what? Very little systems change happened without people taking action. And so that's really what we're trying to do. And I think also that really then relates to the kind of, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, which is what the kind of projects we want to kind of see from this, which have to be around systems change. They're not going to just be about individual benefits, although there may well be individual benefits, but actually that we want people to be thinking about how, frankly, we can make the world a better place through the fellowship and what that enables. So that's in the macro sense what inclusive journalism is trying to do. But we've done that through a range of things. We've published a book of non-fiction essays by members. We've developed a course to kind of help members build sustainable journalism businesses and services. Out of that actually came a really powerful inclusive recruitment guide, which people are using all over the world. But all these are kind of systems change projects, actually, again, rather than, yeah, just kind of pieces of journalism or artifacts of journalism. What this is really about is systems change. So I think from both of us, that's the kind of zoom out perspective on why we think the fellowship is important. But to kind of zoom in, I suppose, to the nuts and bolts, I guess you're the best person to talk about what the experience is actually like. So, what is the kind of day-to-day experience of a fellow at the Institute, and what do they get out of the experience as a whole?
Yeah, thanks, Shirish. I think it would be useful just picking up on your point to talk about why Oxford. That's where the institute is based, and I know that sometimes it builds this image of very high walls and people that kind of only speak to you if it benefits them. So very much transactional in nature and very elitist. I think the institute has been honestly, the reverse of that. Our whole aim in the research that we do and the fellowships that we construct are about, can we bring the best people together, and can they learn from each other and sort of pick up from each other's energy. So that's the Oxford backdrop. There is a very clear cadence to what the week looks like for fellows, and I should mention, and I'm sure you'll see this in the FAQs, and Shirish will talk about it as well. This fellowship is being offered for the Hillary term, as we call it, which is essentially Jan to March. So it's roughly about 10 weeks or so that you will be in Oxford. The week is generally structured to give you time to do your own reading and your own writing and just kind of spend some quiet time, but also feed off the energy of the university, of the team we have at the Institute, and indeed your co-fellows. So Monday and Tuesday are for self-study. And I think one of the greatest charms of Oxford is its libraries. I know a lot of fellows write back saying, we miss that space. That's the space that you get to think and write about your project and really, deeply research it. The rest of the week is a mix of events. So there's time with the fellows where you're kind of discussing topics. There's an internal seminar where you present on a topic of your choice. And honestly, that has varied so much. It has varied from the kind of beats that journalists do to what the cultural context of the region that they come from looks like. We also bring in experts from within the UK or without. We have a bring your own expert module where you can invite in someone you think is hugely interesting and the group could learn from. And then we also have something called journal clubs. And I think, just to spend a minute on that, it's kind of our attempt to bring this body of research closer to what practitioners are doing. So we have a fantastic research team at the Institute, and one day of every week, they spend time with the fellows. There's a few papers that are shared beforehand, research papers, and it's just this open space of practitioners, which are the journalists, asking questions of the researcher and hearing what the research points to. So there's that one as well. And of course, it's not to sort of make you feel like it's all very boring and it's all very intellectual. There's lots of fun stuff. If the weather permits, in that particular term, the fellows go punting. There's a visit up to London. You go see a newsroom. And I think the richest learning you'll find is what's not structured in the program, and the moments that you find with colleagues, and this almost aha moment, I think, where you have a journalist from Kurdistan talking to a journalist from Burkina Faso, talking to a journalist from Norway, talking to a journalist from Wales, and realizing in how many ways they're different, but in how many more ways they're quite similar. So I think that's the cadence of the week, Shirish. And the ultimate goal, of course, is a project, which we will get to in a minute, that they are required to work on. And a lot of what they're doing there is kind of structuring towards that. But uh, that's the fellowship. I think what's really exciting about this one is how we've layered it into this 1+1 in terms of an experience for the journalists. So one is the project that they're going to work on at Reuters Institute. And I must pause to also say that there will be individual mentoring. There'll be time spent with my dear colleague, Caitlin Mercer, who manages the fellowship program. And she's going to be there in the room and spending time with fellows, just kind of supporting them to build that project out. But then there's going to be a second part to it, which is the Network Weaver program. And this is a good moment to sort of pass the
Yeah.
baton back to you, Shirish, to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. And actually, I'll just pick up actually on the fact what we were talking about Oxford, because it can seem very intimidating, but I think in a way there's two sides to it, right? Because one of the great things about having a fellowship at Oxford is the kind of cachet, the credibility that adds to all the work and,
Yeah.
the kind of, and as you say, the research that you have there. And I've said to people always, and around this fellowship as well, that the Reuters Institute for me has always been that the best interface between research and practice there is, and in a way, that's its reputation, kind of globally, of bringing
Yeah,
those two
and just
together.
quickly, Shirish, you're right. I mean, one of the days of the week are literally marked out for fellows to mandatorily go out and attend any lecture of
Yeah,
choice. So you could be sitting there listening to something from, African Asian studies, or you could be listening to something about molecular biology. Honestly, anything
yeah,
that takes your fancy, the entire university and its resources
yeah.
are open to you.
Yeah, and that feels really important as well. So yeah, on the kind of the way our fellowship will be different, as we've talked about, it will have to address a kind of question of systemic inclusion and or innovation. And so that could be something, as I say, really, in a way, one of the questions I think we'll be asking throughout is kind of the theory of change of this, but also as potentially as an interview question itself is, yeah, how do you want the world to look different in 10 years' time as a result of the fellowship and what it enables? So, yeah, the projects we want to see are projects, frankly, that are going to make the world a better place. But the network weaver thing is probably the I suppose the more difficult thing to explain. So we have a group of network weavers in Inclusive Journalism Cymru, and the idea with those is that we've always wanted the organisation to be member led, but also a big part of what we're trying to do is to support people to kind of step into their power, because one of the kind of problems of being marginalized is you never get to step into your power, sometimes even have any power. And there were situations where, if there's ever anything about journalism in Wales, they'd always call me or they'd always call someone I knew. And actually, yeah, we're not the only people that exist who care about making journalism different. So we wanted to open that space up to as many people as possible. So people got to hear about more people got to hear about more interesting work. So that's a role of the network weavers. And also for as a connection with the whole of the membership we have. I think more than 360 members now, and there wouldn't really be 360 working journalists in Wales right now. But the idea of the Network Weaver program, I think, particularly around this program, will be to do with kind of public engagement. So to spread the learnings from the project in Oxford alongside other work we're doing around Wales and potentially beyond as well, the UK and internationally. So in the sort of the few months after the fellowship, what we're expecting is that the fellow would work with us to devise a program of public engagement, whether that was just events around Wales, online events, getting involved in other projects that we're running, which are going to build on everything they've learned and everything they've kind of proposed really in their project while they're in Oxford. But obviously, the detail of that will kind of depend on both the individual and their capacity, but also on the project and where we see the best kind of synergies with other things that might be going on and where the best, in fact, obviously where the best places for them to show off about that work are. So it's kind of difficult to kind of say this is exactly what it'll be because it depends on the individual and the project, but largely it's around spreading the word around what they've learned in Oxford. So, before we open up the floor to questions, I thought it'd be useful to explain a bit more about what the interview process will be like for shortlisted candidates and essentially what we'll be looking for in those interviews. And I've not been in one of these before, so I'm going to hand over to the expert first.
Thank you. We'll build as we speak. I think just to, pick up from the point you're making, Shirish, so much of it is about think about your projects. Think about why you believe what you're working on or what you seek to do can create systemic change. When we open up for our global fellowships, it's really wide. And so we encourage applications that are honestly looking at anything and everything. And that could range from AI to climate, to gender. But this is far more niche in the sense that there is a particular end goal. So think hard about why your project creates that systemic change. And we're not saying that, any of the topics that I just mentioned won't get you there. We just want to see why you think about it so passionately. We have a couple of asks in terms of the application, and they are sort of fantastically answered FAQs on the website for Media Cymru and for the Reuters Institute as well, which is where you can, go on and apply. We want to see a supporting statement. We want to see one reference at the very least. And please, again, don't think of this as sort of onerous expectations. It's not about, is someone stamping approval for me and my work? It's what does someone who's worked with you professionally have to say about your vision and why you're so passionate about this subject? We just want to understand you a bit better. And an updated CV, of course, that would be useful. That's the application stage. Then we get cracking and we sort through those applications. We build our long list and short list, and then we invite you into interview with us or have a chat with us. It's online for ease of distances and geographies. There will be a 4-member panel, 2 from Media Cymru, 2 from Reuters Institute, and essentially we don't require you to plan and prepare anything. We just want to get to know you better. We want to understand what makes you tick, why you're thinking so deeply about this project that you've written about. So there will be space for all 4 panelists, of course, to ask you questions, and then there will be space at the end for you to ask us questions as well. If there's anything you want clarified, if there's anything you want to chat about, you're talking to a bunch of journalists, really. So, we could go really long, but the aim is to have a conversation for about 20 minutes. And of course, most importantly, to hold space for candidates to chat to us as well. But maybe Shirish, you'd like to add something about the project and
Yeah,
think about that.
yeah. I mean, I guess what I'd say generally about the way we've always done interviews is that we don't think of them as a test, right? It's actually just to kind of, in a way, get the best out of the people we're interviewing. We've never seen those things as kind of a weeding out process. It's going to give everyone the opportunity to show their best potential. I think that thing about the reference you mentioned is really important. That actually it's people will know if you're a passionate person, right? And that's in a way what we want to know about, I think. So yeah, and again, the project could be I made some notes from that blog, which I've just dropped in the chat again, which for people who aren't here, again, is on our website, the How to Apply blog. So when we talk about inclusive journalism, Cymru's aims, largely, as I say, they're about systems change. So, for example, it could be something around enhancing inclusive recruitment and retention, like the inclusive recruitment guide we did. It could be around supporting sustainability and innovation, like our inclusive media development lab. It could be offering platforms or spaces for unheard and underrepresented voices, like our book of essays, Cymru and I. It could be researching the information needs of marginalized people and communities, like News for All, the project that I've done through Media Cymru as well, alongside Inclusive Journalism Cymru. But also it could be about centering the Welsh language or culture in journalism, like the event we did in Cynefin recently. And you can read about all those things on our website, and they're linked via our blog. But I think you can see the kinds of things we're trying to center, and also that are going to make this. I think it'll be interesting to see what things feel uniquely Welsh as well, because we've talked about this as being kind of a Welsh fellowship, but that will resonate beyond Wales. And I think that's the kind of thing we're looking for, certainly.
That sounds great. And I was only going to also suggest for anyone interested in applying, head to the Reuters website, take a look at the work that, former journalists and fellows at the Institute have done. It's exactly the point Shirish is making. So many of these challenges resonate all across the world. If there's a gender divide that you see, trust me, that's happening in a lot of places. India, the country that I come from, has such deep caste divides, and those exist in the newsroom as they do in society. Some of our recent fellows, Yasmin Akuna, worked on change-centric journalism, and it was a really powerful project. There's Ngina Kirori, who worked on Gen Alpha, and not repeating the same mistakes we've made with Gen Z and not sort of integrating them into the news conversation. Can we do it differently with Gen Alpha? So there's so many, interesting ideas there. It will be your original idea, but just take a look at what exists there as options and ideas. Thank you, Shirish, for dropping that very
Yeah, I
helpfully.
just dropped Tasmin.
Babbling on about it.
Yeah, I just dropped Tasmin's project into the chat, and it's really brilliant. And actually, I think what that shows is the kind of ambition you can have from the fellowship. That actually she's really taken it in a kind of bunch of directions. There's a whole website around it now. Yeah, she's doing lots of conference appearances and stuff like that around it. But yeah, it's really kind of shown, I think, the ambition and obviously just how smart she is.
And I think it makes it so powerful, this offering, Shirish, because we're partnering so closely with it. So it doesn't drop off a cliff after
No,
doing your project at the Reuters Institute sometimes. And, just to underline this fellowship is absolutely open to independent journalists. And sometimes it feels scary because you've done all this work, but you don't know what to do with it, which is where the Network Weavers program will be so powerful, because it's going to hold you and it's going to hold your work and ensure that it gets amplified.
yeah,
So you must absolutely sort of go forth with courage.
yeah, yeah. And I think actually, what I haven't said is that the whole, I think that is a really important thing that actually you'll have us to support you, like the whole Inclusive Journalism Cymru team, as well as the Reuters Institute team, of course. We're thinking already we'll come up to Oxford a couple of times during the fellowship, so we can kind of support you through that and obviously through the Network Weavers program. So actually, probably more in some ways than people who kind of come out of newsrooms, you'll have support from all sides, and that's really, really important to us. We try to embed care into everything we do.